Welcome back to another video. My name is Sean and I'm a registered dietitian. Today we are going to be going over low-fat nutrition therapy. So as a registered dietitian, there are several educations that you're going to be giving often to your patients, and so you really need to have a good understanding of them. One example would be low fat. There's also low fiber, heart healthy, there's renal, there's a whole bunch of them, but this is going to be pretty common, and so we'll talk about that today. Now, there's a few different kinds of patients that might benefit from this education. One of them is going to be any of your heart healthy patients. Being part of a heart healthy diet is monitoring the amount and types of fat that's consumed. Also, your patients with pancreatitis or any gallbladder disease will also benefit from following a low-fat diet. So there's really three specific sources that patients will get their fat from. The first one is being dairy, the second one is meat, and the third is added oils and added fats. So when I go and see a patient, in addition to printing off a diet education, a low-fat nutrition therapy diet education handout from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics or any diet manual that you use at your facility, I will break it down nice and simple for them. Rather than, we can go over this by food group and all that stuff if they're really interested, but breaking it down nice and simple like this, I think it makes it easier for patients to digest. So, for dairy, the basic principle here is you want to avoid things like whole milk and 2%, as well as any kind of high-fat cheeses. The way that I tell people to kind of think about cheese is like use it as a condiment or an additive, like Parmesan cheese on spaghetti, or sprinkle a little bit of cheese on your taco, rather than doing cheese-based dishes like pizza and lasagna. Those are going to be very high in fat. Also, your whole milk and any of your whole milk or 2% based dairy products. Those are going to be very high in fat. Now, some people might say, well, 2%, isn't that low fat? It's only 2% fat. And so that's one thing I do want to touch on here at the end of the video. So stay tuned for that. The second category here is meat. So your big sources of fat in meat are going to be your processed, and your red meat. So your processed meat, meaning sausage, bacon, bologna, hot dogs, pepperoni, anything that you would find on like a meat lover's pizza, this is going to be your processed meat. We're thinking deli counter type stuff. So it has nitrates, nitrites. If it has something that's used to cure it, it's going to be considered a processed meat. Red meat is also going to be very high in fat. Now, red meat is anything that walks on four legs on land. So that's going to include things like venison, elk, pork, as well as cow, so beef. Though that's all considered red meat. Some people say, I thought pork was considered white meat. No, pork is considered red meat. So if it walks on land with four legs, it's considered red meat. Now, meat in general, so looking at white meat, like if it swims or if it flies, is considered white meat. So white meat is going to be lower in overall fat. The cholesterol content is going to be nearly the same between meat, and that's sort of an aside. But red meat will have similar cholesterol values as white meat, but the overall fat content is higher in red meat. Now, free-ranged or grass-fed or wild game is going to have a better anti-inflammatory to inflammatory type fat ratio. So it's going to have a better omega-3 to omega-6 ratio than farm-fed, corn-fed, soybean-fed cattle. And then the last place here is your added oils and added fat. So it could be in the form of olive oil, canola oil, avocado oil. It could also be something like butter or grease. So this includes your fried food like French fries. And then for your oils, what I say is Typically people should limit their added oils to 2 tablespoons per person per day or less. If your plate is greasy when you go to wash it off, if you can't just use water to rinse your plate off, but your plate or your pans have that oily film on it, and you tell when you get it wet, the droplets bead up, you're probably using too much oils. So these are going to be the 3 places that people might get their extra fat from. Another thing to keep in mind is any kind of symptoms that they have after they eat. So if they have any abdominal pain after they eat, or they have loose stools, steatorrhea, these are going to be indications that potentially their diet is too high in fat. Now, looking at food groups, things like desserts are going to be high in fat, and that's because they usually contain dairy and oils. So of all the foods that have fat, it's usually they either have added fat or they're just naturally high in fat. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, we do need to talk about these percentages and label reading in terms of fat content. So let me erase this board and then we'll go over label reading for fat. Let's briefly talk about label reading. With low-fat diets, it's important to keep in mind that there is no general consensus on what low-fat actually means. There's not an accepted medical definition, the way that there is for low sodium being 140 milligrams per serving or less. For fat, no one has agreed on what that should actually mean, and that's important when you're working with patients or clients in order for them to understand food labels. And it's also important when you're looking at nutrition studies, because if you're looking at something that compares a low-fat to a high-fat diet, and they have every researcher will specify what their definition is for those fat values, but it's not consistent across the board. So with that aside, the way that I define low fat is 20% of calories coming from fat or less. So I'm looking at fat as a percentage of calories. The food industry looks at fat as a percentage by weight. So let's go ahead and take a look at a dietitian approved snack. This Nature's Bakery Fig Bar. Very delicious, by the way, on sale at your local grocery store. So this product here weighs 57 grams. I got a new marker. This is great. Oh, 57 grams. Look at that. This product weighs 57 grams and it has 5 grams of fat. So you multiply by 100%, and what you're going to get is 9% of calories come from fat by weight. This is what the food industry will use when they're describing fat on a label. If you use my method, this product has 200 calories. Now, 5 grams of fat times 9 kcals per gram, right? Because there's 9 calories per gram of fat, gives you 45 kcals from fat. So 45 kcals into 200 gives you 23% fat by calories. You see the difference here when you use it by weight versus by total calories, because there's weight in this product that doesn't include any calories. Things like fiber and water. That's why when we look at things like milk, whole milk is considered 3.4% fat by weight, but it's nearly 50% fat by calories. 2% milk is 2% fat by weight, but it's 35% fat by calories. 1% is 20% fat by calories, and then skim milk is obviously very low in fat. And the industry will do the same for meat. It'll say 90-10, so 90% lean. People think 90% lean, that's pretty good, but it's 90% lean by weight. And what happens when you cook meat? You evaporate that water. So it doesn't even end up weighing the same as when they did the weight before the product was cooked. but that 90-10 is going to be very high in fat. So this is, I don't necessarily recommend that your patients or clients do all this math at the grocery store. If they seem particularly keen or interested in the education that you're providing, you can talk to them about that, especially if they enjoy high-fat dairy products or high-fat meat, letting them know, hey, it's actually there's actually a lot of fat in these products, that the label is kind of misleading. So doing this information for them might be helpful in persuading them to choose lower fat products. But in any case, it is important to know. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, post them down below. Of course, subscribe and give me a thumbs up if you like watching these videos. I do stay late at work to make them for you. And again, stay tuned for the next episode. Cheers.